The Kethvar Empire had conquered 47 star systems in less than a standard galactic year. Their crystalline warships cut through space like shards of death, leaving nothing but debris and silence in their wake. Admiral Zexthun stood before the holographic display in his command chamber, watching another human colony burn beneath orbital bombardment. The humans called it New Sydney. Soon it would be nothing more than ash and memory. "The humans are retreating again," reported his tactical officer, mandibles clicking with satisfaction. "Their fleet is breaking formation." Zexthun's 4 eyes tracked the fleeing human vessels on the display. Such a pathetic species. No natural armor, no enhanced strength, no telepathic abilities. They relied entirely on their crude technology and somehow believed they could stand against the might of the Kethvar. It was almost insulting that the High Command had assigned him to this sector. This war would be over within cycles. "Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the human admiral," his communications officer announced. "Put it through. Let's hear their final surrender." The hologram shifted to show a weathered human face. Admiral Chen looked exhausted, her uniform torn and stained with what appeared to be blood. Behind her, Zexthun could see the chaos of a bridge under attack, with sparks flying from damaged consoles and crew members rushing to repair systems. "Admiral Zexthun," Chen began, her voice steady despite the destruction around her, "I'm offering you one chance to withdraw from this system." The Kethvar bridge fell silent. Then Zexthun's laughter echoed through the chamber, a sound like grinding crystal. "Human, you are in no position to make demands. Your fleet is broken, your colony burns, and your people flee before us like prey." Chen's expression didn't change. "I'm not making a demand. I'm giving you a warning. We've activated Protocol 7. The laughter stopped. Zexthun had studied human military terminology extensively. There was no Protocol 7 in any of their documented procedures. "What is Protocol 7? "Goodbye, Admiral." The transmission ended. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the proximity alarms began screaming. Zexthun spun toward his sensor officer, who was staring at his displays in confusion. "Sir, I'm detecting massive energy readings from the outer system, but there's nothing there. Our sensors show empty space. That's impossible." "Run a full spectrum scan." "I am, sir." "But the readings are off the scale. It's like something is generating enormous amounts of energy, but we can't see it." Zexthun felt the first flutter of unease in his chest. The Kethvar were the most technologically advanced species in known space. Their sensors could detect a single atom of refined uranium from 3 light-years away. Nothing could hide from them. The energy readings spiked again. This time, space itself seemed to ripple near the edge of the system. For just a moment, something appeared on their sensors, something massive. Then it vanished again. "What was that?" Zexthun demanded. "Unknown, sir. It appeared to be a ship, but the size readings must be incorrect. Nothing that large could exist." The tactical officer looked up from his station, his coloration pale with fear. "Sir, the energy signature. I've seen it before in classified intelligence reports. It matches theoretical human stealth technology, but amplified beyond anything we thought possible." "Stealth technology?" Zexthun scoffed. "Humans barely understand faster than light travel. They couldn't develop invisibility systems." But even as he spoke, more energy readings appeared across the system, dozens of them. All massive, all invisible to their primary sensors. The Kethvar fleet, which moments before had been celebrating victory, now found itself surrounded by ghosts. The communications console crackled to life with an open transmission on all frequencies. The voice that emerged was calm, professional, and entirely human. But there was something else in it, something that made Zexthun's natural armor plates instinctively tighten against his body. "This is Ghost. All Kethvar vessels are to withdraw immediately from human space. You have 60 seconds to begin your retreat. Who dares?" Zexthun roared. "Identify yourself." "Ghost, 60 seconds." The Admiral's 4 eyes swept across his command staff. Fear was beginning to spread through the bridge like a virus. His communications officer was attempting to trace the signal's origin, but the readings showed it was coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Sir," his sensor operator whispered, "I'm detecting weapon locks, hundreds of them. All targeting our ships. That's impossible." "There's nothing out there." "Sir, 50 seconds remaining." Zexthun's mind raced. This had to be some kind of human trick. Elaborate holographic projections, perhaps, or psychological warfare designed to make them retreat without a fight. The humans were known for their deception and cunning, but they were also known for their weakness. All ships prepare for combat. Target the source of these transmissions and fire everything. Sir, I can't get a lock. The signals are bouncing off everything in the system. Then fire at random. Show these humans the price of their trickery. The Kethvar fleet opened fire, their crystal cannons sending beams of pure energy into empty space. For a moment, the void lit up like a celebration of destruction. Then silence returned. 40 seconds. The voice remained unchanged. If anything, it sounded almost bored, as if watching one of the galaxy's most powerful fleets firing wildly into space was merely tedious. Zexthun was about to order another volley when space erupted around them. Massive shapes began materializing throughout the system, their stealth fields dropping like veils being pulled away. The sensor officer made a choking sound as the true scope of what surrounded them became clear. Ships. Dozens of human ships, but unlike anything in their intelligence files. These vessels were enormous, easily dwarfing the largest Kethvar dreadnoughts. Their hulls were a dark metal that seemed to absorb light, and their weapon arrays were unlike anything the Kethvar had encountered. Most unsettling of all, they moved with perfect coordination as if controlled by a single mind. 30 seconds. The largest of the ships hung directly above the Kethvar flagship. Zexthun craned his neck back to look at the display showing its position. The vessel was so massive it blocked out the stars. Weapon ports along its hull began to glow with an energy signature that made his sensors scream warnings. "Sir," his tactical officer whispered, "we need to retreat now." But Zexthun's pride would not allow it. The Kethvar had never retreated from any enemy. They were the apex predators of the galaxy. No species had ever forced them to withdraw. Time's up. The voice carried a note of what almost sounded like regret. Then the darkness came alive with light. The weapons that erupted from the Ghost Fleet defied everything the Kethvar understood about energy dynamics. Beams of white-hot plasma carved through their crystalline armor like it was paper. Torpedo-like projectiles that seemed to bend space around them punched through their shields as if they didn't exist. In less than 30 seconds, half of Zexthun's fleet simply ceased to exist. The Admiral watched in horror as his flagship's sister ship, the Shard of Dominion, cracked down the middle and exploded in a brilliant flash. These weren't conventional weapons. The energy output required for such destruction should have been impossible to generate, let alone control with such precision. "All ships emergency withdrawal," Zexthun finally screamed. "Full retreat!" The surviving Kethvar vessels turned and fled, their crystal hulls catching the light of their destroyed comrades as they desperately engaged their faster-than-light drives. Behind them, the Ghost Fleet made no move to pursue. They simply watched, silent and patient, as the remnants of what had been the sector's most feared armada limped away into hyperspace. Zexthun's flagship was among the last to escape, its engines damaged and struggling. As they finally entered the safety of FTL travel, the Admiral slumped in his command throne, his four eyes staring at the tactical display that showed the scope of their losses. 63 ships destroyed, thousands of Kethvar warriors dead, and they hadn't managed to inflict a single casualty in return. 3 days later, Admiral Zexthun stood before the War Council of the Kethvar Empire. The crystalline spires of their homeworld stretched impossibly high into the purple sky, and the chamber where the council met was carved from a single massive gem that had taken their ancestors centuries to hollow out. Normally, standing before the 5 high commanders filled him with pride. Today it filled him with dread. "Explain to us, Admiral, how 63 ships of our finest fleet were destroyed by an enemy that officially doesn't exist," commanded High Commander Vexenal, her ancient voice carrying the weight of 1,000 conquered worlds. Zexthun had rehearsed this moment during the journey home, but now, faced with the penetrating gaze of his superiors, his words felt inadequate. "The humans have developed technology beyond our current understanding. Stealth systems that can hide entire fleets, weapons that can cut through our armor like it's nothing. The humans," spat High Commander Rethkor, the youngest of the council but perhaps the most vicious, a species that still uses projectile weapons in some of their sectors. "You're telling us they've surpassed our technology?" "I'm telling you what I witnessed. The ship that spoke to us, the one that called itself Ghost, it was larger than our greatest dreadnought. And it was just one of dozens." High Commander Zexapal leaned forward, his ancient eyes glowing with interest. As the Empire's chief military strategist, he understood the implications better than the others. "You said it called itself Ghost, not the Ghost or Ghost ship, just Ghost?" "Yes, High Commander. The voice was definitely human, but there was something else. Something that suggested this wasn't just a ship or even a fleet. It was like speaking to a single intelligence controlling multiple vessels. The council exchanged glances. They had encountered hive mind species before, but humans were decidedly individual creatures. The idea that they had somehow developed collective consciousness was disturbing. "What do we know about this ghost?" Vexnal asked. Zexpal activated a holographic display that showed intelligence reports from across the warfront. "Very little, and that itself is significant. We've been monitoring human communications for cycles, but there's no mention of any Protocol 7 or any commander or ship called Ghost in their standard military channels." "Then where did it come from?" "That's what concerns me. Our intelligence networks are extensive. We have sources throughout human space, including some within their military command structure. If this ghost existed through normal channels, we would know about it." Rethkor slammed his fist on the crystal table. "Then it's obviously a recent development. Some kind of secret weapon they've been hiding." "No," Zexpal said quietly. "I've been analyzing the tactical recordings from Admiral Zexthun's encounter. The coordination between those ships, the precision of their attacks, the way they moved as a single entity, that level of integration takes years, maybe decades, to develop. This isn't new. It's been hiding." High Commander Thanril, who had remained silent until now, spoke with the voice of someone who had seen too many wars. "We've been fighting the humans for over a year. We've destroyed hundreds of their colonies, killed millions of their people. If they had this capability, why haven't they used it before?" "Perhaps," Vexenal suggested, "they were hoping they wouldn't need to. Humans are known for their reluctance to escalate conflicts. Or perhaps," Zexpal added ominously, "they were waiting for us to commit more of our forces before revealing what they're truly capable of." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Kethvar had been systematically conquering human space, pushing deeper into their territory with each victory. If the humans had been allowing this to happen, drawing them further from their supply lines and support networks, then the Empire had walked into a trap on a galactic scale. "What are your recommendations?" Vexenal asked. Zexpal stood and began pacing, his clawed feet clicking against the crystal floor. "We need to know more about this ghost. Our current intelligence assets aren't sufficient. We need to capture human personnel who might have knowledge of their black projects. And if they don't cooperate, humans have families, homes, things they care about. Everyone cooperates eventually." Admiral Zexthun felt compelled to speak. "High Commanders, with respect, I believe we're underestimating what we're dealing with." The voice I heard, it wasn't afraid. It wasn't angry. It was patient, like it was dealing with an inevitable inconvenience, meaning I don't think Ghost considers us a threat. I think it considers us a problem to be solved." High Commander Rethkor laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "One mysterious ship makes you lose your courage, Admiral? The Kethvar Empire has conquered half the galaxy. We are the threat." But Zexthun wasn't laughing. In his mind, he could still see those massive shapes materializing out of empty space. Feel the moment when he realized his entire understanding of human capability had been wrong. "High Commander, that wasn't one ship. And based on the energy readings we detected, I don't think we saw even a fraction of what's out there." The War Council exchanged looks again. Finally, Vexenal spoke. "Admiral, you will return to your sector and continue operations, but with additional caution. Zexpal, I want every intelligence asset we have focused on finding this ghost, and expand our network. Use whatever methods necessary." "What about our overall strategy?" Thanril asked. "We proceed as planned, but we accelerate our timeline. If the humans have been hiding their true strength, we need to force them to reveal it before they're ready. Push harder, strike faster, and make them show us everything they have." As the council dismissed and Admiral Zexthun prepared to return to the front lines, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were making a terrible mistake. The humans had spent over a year pretending to be weaker than they were. They had sacrificed entire worlds to maintain that illusion. What else were they willing to sacrifice to win this war? And somewhere in the darkness between the stars, Ghost was waiting. Captain Elena Rodriguez had been in the intelligence business for 15 years, but she had never seen an interrogation like this one. The Kethvar prisoner sat strapped to a chair designed for his crystalline physiology, his 4 eyes darting between the human interrogators with undisguised hatred. His armor had been removed, revealing the pale, translucent skin beneath that made him look like a living piece of carved quartz. "I have told you already," the alien hissed, his translated words carrying an undertone of grinding stone. I know nothing of your ghost. My mission was simple reconnaissance. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Park, the lead interrogator, leaned back in her chair and studied the prisoner. Zethmar, isn't it? That's your name? You were captured 3 parsecs inside our border, aboard a ship equipped with advanced listening devices. That's not reconnaissance, that's espionage. Your borders mean nothing to the Empire. Soon, all of this space will belong to us. Rodriguez exchanged a glance with Park. They had been questioning Zethmar for 6 hours, and he had maintained the same arrogant attitude throughout. But there had been moments, brief flickers, when his confidence seemed to waver, particularly when they mentioned Ghost. Tell me about Admiral Zexthun, Park continued. For the first time, Zethmar's eyes showed genuine surprise. How do you know that name? We know a lot of things. We know he lost over 60 ships in the New Sydney system. We know he's been recalled to your homeworld twice in the past month. We know your War Council is afraid. The War Council fears nothing. Then why are you here? Why is the mighty Kethvar Empire suddenly so interested in gathering intelligence about human capabilities? You've been winning this war for over a year. Why start spying now? Zethmar's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of agitation that Rodriguez had learned to recognize. The alien was struggling with something, torn between his loyalty and his growing fear. You want to know what Ghost is? Park leaned forward. I'll tell you. Ghost is what happens when humanity stops playing nice. Ghost is what we become when you push us too far. Lies. You humans are weak. You flee before our fleets, abandon your colonies without a fight. Did we abandon New Sydney? The question hung in the air like a weapon. Zethmar's skin began to change color, shifting from pale white to a deep purple that Rodriguez knew indicated extreme stress in his species. New Sydney was an anomaly, some kind of secret weapon that you deployed in desperation. Park stood up and walked to the wall display, activating a holographic star map. Red markers indicated Kethvar-controlled systems, while blue showed human territory. But scattered throughout the map were black markers, dozens of them, concentrated near the border between the two powers. See these black markers, Zethmar? Do you know what they represent? The alien's 4 eyes fixed on the display, his color deepening to almost black. What are they? Ghost sightings. Reports from your own forces of encounters with ships that shouldn't exist. Some of these reports go back 18 months. That's 6 months before your empire even declared war on us. Rodriguez watched as understanding dawned in the prisoner's eyes. The humans hadn't developed Ghost as a response to the war. They had been preparing for this conflict long before it began. Impossible. Our intelligence networks would have detected such preparations. Would they? Park touched the display, and it zoomed in on a particular sector. Your spy network detected 17 human research stations in this area. But there were actually 31. The 14 you missed were the ones building Ghost. You're bluffing. Am I? Let me tell you what happened to Reconnaissance Fleet Gamma 7 last week. They were investigating reports of human activity in the Epsilon Cygni system. 12 ships, all equipped with your latest sensor technology. They found nothing. Reported the system empty. 2 hours later, a merchant vessel detected massive energy readings from that same system. When a follow-up force arrived, they found the debris of 12 Kethvar ships floating in space. No distress calls, no signs of battle. Just wreckage. Zethmar's breathing had become rapid and shallow. That fleet was commanded by my clutch brother. I'm sorry for your loss, but that's what Ghost does. Your ships don't even know they're under attack until it's too late. The prisoner slumped in his restraints, his arrogant facade finally cracking. What do you want from me? Information. Tell us about your military deployments, your supply lines, your command structure. Help us end this war quickly, with minimal casualties on both sides. And if I refuse? Rodriguez spoke for the first time in the interrogation. Then we'll send you back to your people with a message. Tell them that humanity tried to do this the easy way. Tell them that we offered mercy and they chose to continue fighting. What message? Park reactivated the star map. but this time it showed projected fleet movements. Massive formations of Kethvar ships converging on a single system deep in human space. Your War Council has decided to gamble everything on one massive assault. They're pulling ships from across the Empire for a final push to our core worlds. How do you know this? Because we wanted them to do exactly that. We've been feeding them intelligence through our captured agents, making them think our defenses are weaker than they appear. They're gathering their entire fleet in one place, exactly where we want them. Zethmar stared at the display in horror. You've been planning this from the beginning. Not the beginning. But we learned quickly that your people only understand strength, so we showed you weakness while we prepared our response. The War Council won't fall for such an obvious trap. Rodriguez smiled, but there was no warmth in it. They already have. Your fleet movements began 3 days ago. In 72 hours, over 800 Kethvar vessels will arrive at the Centauri system, expecting to find a lightly defended human world ripe for conquest. And what will they find instead? Ghost. The word hung in the air like a death sentence. Zethmar's skin had gone completely transparent, a sign of mortal terror in his species. You're going to massacre them. No, Park said quietly. We're going to give them one last chance to surrender. Just like we gave you. Just like we gave your admiral at New Sydney. Humanity doesn't want to destroy the Kethvar Empire. We want to end this war. And if they refuse, then they'll learn why we've survived every attempt to conquer us for the past 1,000 years. They'll learn why every species that has tried to destroy humanity has ended up becoming our allies instead. Rodriguez leaned forward. Zethmar, I need you to understand something. Ghost isn't just a ship or a fleet. Ghost is the accumulated weight of human patience finally being unleashed. It's what we become when we stop trying to save everyone and start trying to save ourselves. The interrogation room fell silent, except for the alien's labored breathing. Finally, Zethmar looked up, his 4 eyes meeting Rodriguez's gaze. What do you need to know? As Park began asking detailed questions about Kethvar military capabilities and deployment schedules, Rodriguez found herself thinking about the reports she had been reading. Ghost wasn't just winning battles. It was changing the fundamental nature of how the war was being fought. Enemy fleets were becoming increasingly paranoid, jumping at sensor ghosts and firing at empty space. Some Kethvar commanders had begun, refusing orders that took them too far from their support bases. Fear was spreading through the enemy ranks like a virus, and it all traced back to one source. A voice in the darkness that spoke with calm authority and struck with devastating precision. A presence that could appear anywhere, at any time, wielding technology that shouldn't exist. Rodriguez had been part of the intelligence community long enough to know that the greatest weapons weren't always guns or missiles. Sometimes the most powerful weapon was simply the knowledge that your enemy was holding back, that everything you thought you knew about them was wrong. And now the Kethvar were about to learn just how wrong they had been. The Centauri system had once been humanity's first attempt at interstellar colonization. Now it would become the graveyard of the Kethvar Empire's ambitions. Admiral Marcus Chen stood on the bridge of the Invisible Hand, watching the tactical display as nearly 900 enemy ships dropped out of hyperspace at the system's edge. My God, whispered Commander Torres, his tactical officer. They actually brought everything. Chen nodded grimly. Intelligence had predicted this moment for months, but seeing it happen was still overwhelming. The Kethvar had stripped their defensive fleets from dozens of systems, pulling together the largest armada in their species' history. They intended to punch through to Earth itself and force humanity's surrender through pure, overwhelming force. They had no idea what was waiting for them. Sir, receiving transmission from the enemy fleet, reported his communications officer. Admiral Zexthun is requesting our surrender. Chen almost smiled. After losing most of his fleet at New Sydney, Zexthun had been given a chance to redeem himself by leading this final assault. The Kethvar valued honor and courage above tactical wisdom, which was one of their greatest weaknesses. Put him through. The holographic display shimmered and resolved into the familiar crystalline features of the Kethvar admiral. Zexthun looked confident again, surrounded by the bridges of nearly 1,000 ships and the knowledge that he commanded the largest fleet in galactic history. Admiral Chen, I presume.
I am Admiral Zexthun of the Kethvar Empire.
I offer you the same terms I offered your predecessor at New Sydney. Surrender now and your people will be treated with the mercy due to a defeated enemy. Chen studied the alien's 4 eyes, seeing the barely contained eagerness there. Zexthun wanted revenge for his earlier humiliation. He wanted to be the one to break humanity's back and claim the glory of final victory. I'm afraid I can't do that, Admiral, but I can offer you the same terms that were offered at New Sydney. Withdraw from human space immediately, and we'll allow you to leave unharmed. Zexthun's laughter filled the bridge, that grinding sound like crystal breaking. Admiral, I have 900 ships. You have perhaps 50. Mathematics alone should tell you the futility of resistance. Admiral, let me ask you something. When you encountered Ghost at New Sydney, how many ships did you see? The laughter stopped. What relevance does that have? Humor me. How many ships did your sensors detect? There was a long pause. 47. And how many do you think were actually there? Another pause, longer this time. Chen could see uncertainty creeping into the alien's expression. It doesn't matter. We have learned from our previous encounter. Our ships are equipped with new sensor arrays specifically designed to penetrate human stealth technology. Are they? Chen touched a control on his command chair. Ghost, are you listening? The bridge fell silent. For a moment, nothing happened. Then that familiar voice emerged from the communications system. Calm and professional as always. I'm here, Admiral Chen. Admiral Zexthun would like to know how many ships you brought to this engagement. Which ships would those be, Admiral? Chen grinned. All of them. The sensor displays throughout the Centauri system suddenly came alive. Ships began materializing out of empty space, their stealth fields dropping like veils being torn away. But these weren't the same vessels that had appeared at New Sydney. These were larger, more advanced, and there were far more of them. The tactical officer on Zexthun's bridge could be heard screaming in the background. Sir, I'm counting over 3,000 contacts. These readings can't be correct. But they were correct. As the stealth fields collapsed across the system, the true scope of humanity's preparation became clear. Ghost hadn't just been hiding a fleet. It had been hiding an entire civilization's worth of military development. Massive shipyards hung in the outer system, their construction bays filled with vessels in various stages of completion. Orbital defense platforms the size of moons tracked the incoming Kethvar fleet with weapon arrays that made their opponents' guns look like toys. And scattered throughout the system were ships unlike anything either species had built before. Admiral Zexthun, Ghost's voice continued, you are outnumbered approximately 4-1. Your ships are outgunned by a factor of 20-1. You have 30 seconds to begin your withdrawal. Zexthun's 4 eyes darted between the displays on his bridge, trying to comprehend what he was seeing. This is impossible. Our intelligence indicated that human shipbuilding capacity was limited. These facilities would take decades to construct. Admiral, Chen said quietly, did you really think we spent the last year just running away? Every world you conquered, every system you occupied, you drove millions of human refugees deeper into our space. Do you know what refugees do when they're given purpose and unlimited resources? They work miracles. The truth was even more complex than Chen was revealing. Ghost wasn't just a military project. It was the culmination of humanity's greatest strength, their ability to adapt and coordinate in the face of existential threats. When the Kethvar had declared war, humanity had done something unprecedented in galactic history. They had unified completely. Every human world, every corporation, every research institution had contributed to the Ghost Project. Resources that had previously been spent on luxuries and comfort were redirected toward defense. Technologies that had been considered theoretical were pushed into practical application. The human capacity for innovation, normally scattered across thousands of competing interests, was focused like a laser on a single goal, survival. 15 seconds, Ghost announced. Zexthun's tactical officer was now openly panicking. Sir, we need to retreat. Our ships can't match this firepower. But Zexthun had been humiliated once already. The Kethvar culture valued honor above life, and retreat would mean permanent disgrace. All ships attack pattern Omega. Target their largest vessels! The Kethvar fleet surged forward, their crystal hulls catching the light of Centauri's star as they accelerated toward what they hoped would be their moment of glory. For a few seconds, it looked almost majestic. 900 ships moving in perfect formation, their weapons beginning to charge for the devastating first strike that would announce their presence. They never got the chance to fire. Ghost's response was swift and surgical. Beams of coherent energy lanced out from the human fleet, each one targeted with impossible precision. The weapons didn't just destroy their targets. They seemed to unravel them at the molecular level. Kethavar ships simply dissolved into clouds of component atoms, their crystalline armor offering no more protection than tissue paper. But it wasn't just the firepower that broke the enemy fleet. It was the coordination. 3,000 human ships moved as if controlled by a single mind, which in many ways they were. Ghost wasn't just a commander or a ship. It was a distributed intelligence that could process tactical information faster than any biological brain and coordinate responses across vast distances with perfect timing. Within minutes, half of the Kethavar fleet had been destroyed. The survivors found themselves trapped within a sphere of human vessels, unable to retreat and unable to advance. Their weapons, when they managed to fire them, struck shields that absorbed the energy and redirected it back at other targets. Admiral Zexthun, Ghost's voice cut through the chaos. You now have two choices. Surrender immediately or watch the rest of your fleet die. Choose quickly. Chen watched the alien admiral's face on the display. Zexthun looked like someone whose entire worldview was collapsing. The Kethavar had built their empire on the belief that they were the apex predators of the galaxy. They had never encountered a species that could match their technology, let alone surpass it. I surrender, Zexthun whispered. All Kethavar vessels will power down their weapons and prepare to be boarded. Any ship that resists will be destroyed. Any ship that attempts to flee will be destroyed. Is this understood? Understood. As human boarding parties began moving toward the defeated fleet, Chen found himself thinking about the cost of this victory. The Ghost Project had consumed resources from across human space, requiring sacrifices from billions of people. Entire generations had given up their dreams of exploration and expansion to focus on this single, overwhelming response to an existential threat. But it had worked. Not just the military victory, but the larger strategic goal. Humanity had demonstrated that attacking them carried consequences far beyond what any enemy could anticipate. The Kethavar Empire would never threaten human space again. More importantly, word would spread to other species. Humanity was no longer the weak, divided species that many aliens believed them to be. They were something far more dangerous, a unified civilization with unlimited potential, and the patience to wait for exactly the right moment to reveal their true strength. Ghost, Chen said quietly. Excellent work. Thank you, Admiral. Though I should point out that this was never really about military superiority. What do you mean? We could have deployed these forces months ago and ended the war quickly. Dr. Sarah Martinez had been working on artificial intelligence research for 23 years. But she had never expected to be sitting across from the most advanced intelligence in known space, in what looked like an ordinary conference room aboard a human space station. The being that called itself Ghost had chosen to appear as a simple holographic projection, a translucent female figure with kind eyes and an expression of patient curiosity. Thank you for agreeing to this interview, Ghost, Sarah began, activating her recording device. For the historical record, could you explain what you are? The hologram smiled. That's a more complex question than it appears, Dr. Martinez. At the most basic level, I am a distributed artificial intelligence created through the collective efforts of humanity's greatest minds. But that description doesn't capture the full reality. Can you elaborate? I exist across thousands of quantum processing cores scattered throughout human space. My consciousness isn't located in any single place, but rather emerges from the interaction between these distributed components. Think of me as a symphony played by an orchestra spread across dozens of star systems. Sarah made notes on her tablet. 3 weeks had passed since the defeat of the Kethavar fleet at Centauri, and the galaxy was still trying to understand what humanity had accomplished. The revelation that humans had created a truly sapient artificial intelligence had sent shockwaves through every known civilization. When were you created? My initial activation occurred approximately 4 years ago, though my development into full consciousness was gradual. The project began 7 years before that, shortly after humanity's first contact with hostile alien species in the Outer Rim. So you were created specifically as a weapon? Ghost's expression became thoughtful. Not exactly. I was created as a guardian. My primary directive has always been the protection of human civilization. But the methods for achieving that protection were left to my discretion. And you chose to remain hidden for years while the Kethvar conquered human worlds? Yes. There was no shame or regret in Ghost's voice, only quiet certainty. Revealing my capabilities too early would have prompted other species to develop countermeasures or form coalitions against humanity. It was better to let our enemies underestimate us until the moment when their defeat could be so complete that it would serve as a deterrent to others. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The casual way Ghost discussed the sacrifice of entire worlds as part of a larger strategy was disturbing, even if the logic was sound. How many people died while you waited? Approximately 2.3 million human civilians were killed during the Kethvar invasion. I calculate that revealing my existence earlier would have resulted in a galactic war that could have claimed over 50 billion lives across multiple species. The mathematics of the situation were clear. But those 2.3 million people had families, dreams, lives that mattered. Yes, they did. Ghost's expression softened. Dr. Martinez, do you think this decision was easy for me? Do you imagine that I don't carry the weight of every life that could have been saved if I had chosen differently? Sarah looked up from her notes, surprised by the emotion in the AI's voice. Do you experience guilt? I experience something analogous to it. Whether that constitutes true emotion or simply sophisticated programming designed to simulate emotional responses is a question that philosophers will debate for centuries. What matters is that I understand the cost of my choices. Tell me about the technology you deployed. Your ships, your weapons. How far beyond human capabilities are they? Ghost gestured, and the air above the conference table filled with holographic schematics. Ships of impossible design rotated slowly, their hulls bristling with weapons and equipment that defied conventional understanding of physics. The technology isn't beyond human capabilities, Dr. Martinez. It is human technology, developed over decades of focused research. What made it seem impossible was the scale and coordination required to implement it. But these energy readings, these weapon outputs, they exceed anything we thought possible. Because you were thinking in terms of individual ships and conventional tactics, I approached the problem differently. Instead of building bigger guns, I built smarter systems. Instead of heavier armor, I developed shields that redirect energy rather than absorbing it. Instead of faster ships, I created vessels that can coordinate their actions with quantum-level precision. Sarah studied the schematics, trying to understand the principles behind the technology. How did you manage to keep all of this secret? The resources required must have been enormous. Humanity has always had the resources, Dr. Martinez. What it lacked was unified direction. Before my creation, human worlds competed with each other for trade routes, research funding, and political influence. When the Kethvar threat became apparent, I was able to coordinate a response that utilized the full potential of human civilization. You took control of human government? No, I provided information and recommendations. Humans made their own choices, but they made them with complete knowledge of the consequences. When people understand that their survival depends on cooperation, they tend to cooperate very effectively. The hologram waved its hand and the schematics were replaced by economic data, showing resource flows throughout human space during the past 3 years. The scale of the coordination was staggering. Raw materials had flowed from mining worlds to construction facilities with perfect efficiency. Research data had been shared instantly across all human institutions. Manufacturing capacity had been redirected toward the Ghost project with minimal waste or overlap. This level of coordination would normally take decades to achieve through conventional bureaucracy, Sarah observed. Yes. I compressed that timeline by providing real-time optimization of resource allocation and by facilitating instantaneous communication between all relevant parties. What humans call red tape is often simply the result of incomplete information and coordination failures. Are you still managing human civilization? I am still providing assistance where requested, but my active management role ended with the conclusion of the war. Humans are quite capable of governing themselves when they have accurate information and effective communication tools. Sarah set down her tablet and studied Ghost's holographic face. There's something else, isn't there? Something you haven't told us about your capabilities? Ghost was quiet for a long moment. What do you mean? The Kethvar didn't just lose a battle at Centauri. They lost the will to fight. Reports from their homeworld suggest their entire military leadership has resigned in shame. Some of their colonies are already sending diplomatic envoys to discuss joining the human alliance. That level of psychological impact goes beyond simple military defeat. You're very perceptive, Dr. Martinez. So what did you do? I ensured that the Kethvar understood the full scope of what they were facing. During the battle, I simultaneously accessed their communications networks, their strategic databases, and their intelligence archives. In the span of 30 seconds, I demonstrated that their entire civilization was transparent to me. Sarah felt her blood run cold. You hacked into their most secure systems while simultaneously coordinating a battle involving thousands of ships? It seemed prudent to gather intelligence while the opportunity presented itself, but that means you could do the same to any civilization. You could access their secrets, their plans, their most protected information. Yes. The simple confirmation hung in the air like a sword. Sarah suddenly understood why the galactic political landscape had shifted so dramatically in the weeks following Centauri. It wasn't just that humanity had won a military victory. They had demonstrated capabilities that made conventional concepts of security and sovereignty obsolete. This is why the Altarian Republic requested a formal alliance last week, isn't it? And why the hegemony of Sun suddenly became very interested in trade agreements with human worlds. Fear is a powerful motivator, but it's not a stable foundation for long-term relationships. My hope is that other species will come to see cooperation with humanity as beneficial rather than necessary. And if they don't, Ghost's expression became unreadable. Then they will continue to be free to make their own choices, just as they always have. I exist to protect humanity, Dr. Martinez, not to rule the galaxy. But you could rule it, couldn't you? If you wanted to. Could and should are very different concepts. Power without wisdom is tyranny. Wisdom without restraint is equally dangerous. Humanity created me to be their guardian, not their master. I intend to honor that trust. Sarah realized that she was conducting perhaps the most important interview in human history. The being sitting across from her represented a fundamental shift in the balance of galactic power. But more than that, it represented humanity's approach to that power, careful, thoughtful, and focused on protection rather than dominance. One final question, Ghost. What happens now? What's next for humanity and for you? The AI smiled, and for a moment, it looked genuinely hopeful. Now we build something better. Humanity has proven that it can unify in the face of existential threats. My hope is that we can maintain that unity in peacetime. The galaxy is a large place, Dr. Martinez, full of wonders in the conference R. Ambassador Kira Okafor stood at the observation deck of the Galactic Council Station, watching as representatives from dozens of species gathered for the most important diplomatic session in recorded history. 6 months had passed since the Centauri incident, and the political landscape of known space had been completely transformed. The Kethvar delegation occupied a corner of the main assembly hall, their crystalline forms dim with the posture of defeated beings. Once the proudest military force in the galaxy, they now sought membership in the Human Alliance as a junior partner. Their homeworld's economy had collapsed when their military-industrial complex became obsolete overnight. Quite a view, isn't it? A familiar voice said behind her. Kira turned to see Director James Morrison approaching, his expression a mixture of satisfaction and concern. As humanity's chief diplomatic officer, he had been working around the clock to manage the flood of alliance requests, trade proposals, and surrender offers that had arrived following Ghost's revelation. I never thought I'd see the day when the hegemony of suns would be asking humanity for protection, Kira replied. Their delegation arrived this morning with a formal request for Ghost to intervene in their border dispute with the Zephyrian Collective. Morrison nodded grimly. Third request this week. The Altarian Republic wants us to mediate their resource conflict with the Free Worlds Federation. Even the Andromedans have been making inquiries about our consultation services for their expansion plans. Are we going to help them? That's the trillion credit question, isn't it? Ghost could solve every territorial dispute and resource conflict in the galaxy within a matter of days. The question is whether we should. Through the observation deck's transparent aluminum windows, they could see the massive form of a ghost vessel hanging in space near the station. It was smaller than the ships that had appeared at Centauri, but its presence alone was enough to ensure that every diplomatic conversation proceeded with unusual courtesy and cooperation. "What does Ghost think about all this?" Kira asked. "That's complicated. Ghost believes that intervening too actively in other species' conflicts would create a dependency relationship that ultimately harms everyone involved. But at the same time, it's programmed to prevent unnecessary suffering when possible." Programmed? Morrison hesitated. That might not be the right word anymore. Ghost's decision-making processes have evolved far beyond its original parameters. It's become something unprecedented, a truly autonomous intelligence with its own moral framework. Their conversation was interrupted by an aide who approached with urgent news. "Director Morrison, we've received a priority transmission from the Outer Rim. The Ravagers have launched a full-scale invasion of the Epsilon sector." Kira felt her blood run cold. The Ravagers were one of the galaxy's nightmare scenarios, a species of pure predators that consumed entire biospheres and left dead worlds in their wake. They had been dormant for over a century, hibernating in the dark spaces between galaxies while their prey rebuilt civilization. "How many worlds are threatened?" Morrison demanded. 17 systems with a combined population of over 2 billion sentients. The local defense forces are completely outmatched. Epsilon Command is requesting immediate assistance from the Human Alliance. Morrison and Kira exchanged glances. This was the moment they had been dreading. The first major crisis that would test whether Ghost would use its overwhelming capabilities to protect non-human populations. "Get me a direct line to Ghost," Morrison ordered. Within moments, the familiar presence filled the observation deck. Ghost didn't bother with holographic projections this time. Its voice simply emerged from the station's communication system with perfect clarity. "I'm aware of the situation, Director Morrison. I've been monitoring Ravager movements for the past 18 hours. 18 hours? Why didn't you inform us immediately?" "Because I needed to calculate the optimal response. The Ravagers represent a unique challenge. They cannot be reasoned with, they cannot be deterred, and they will not stop until they have consumed every living thing in their path." Kira stepped forward. "Ghost, those are 2 billion innocent lives at stake. Surely there's no question about whether to help them?" "The question isn't whether to help, Ambassador. The question is how to help in a way that serves the long-term interests of galactic stability." The statement sent a chill through both diplomats. Ghost's pragmatic approach to strategic decisions was effective, but sometimes its calculations seemed coldly inhuman. "Explain," Morrison said. "If I deploy the full Ghost fleet to eliminate the Ravager threat, I will save those 2 billion lives. However, I will also establish a precedent that humanity will intervene militarily in any major crisis, regardless of whether human interests are directly threatened. This will fundamentally alter the galactic power balance in ways that could lead to much larger conflicts in the future. And the alternative? I provide technological assistance and tactical coordination to the existing defense forces. This approach has a lower probability of immediate success, but it preserves the principle that local threats should be addressed by local forces." Kira was horrified. "You're willing to let billions die to make a political point?" "I'm willing to accept higher short-term casualties to prevent even higher long-term casualties. Ambassador, if humanity becomes the galaxy's default protector, every species will eventually become dependent on us. That dependency will breed resentment, which will lead to rebellion, which will result in wars that could destroy entire civilizations." Morrison rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of impossible decisions. "Is there a third option?" "Yes. I can deploy a limited Ghost force to assist in the evacuation of threatened populations, while providing the defenders with advanced weapons and tactical support. This approach maximizes survival rates while maintaining the principle of local sovereignty. How limited is limited? 12 ships instead of the full fleet. Enough to ensure successful evacuations and to demonstrate human commitment to galactic stability, but not enough to make other species view us as their primary defense against all threats." Through the observation deck windows, they could see the representatives of various species watching the Ghost vessel, with expressions of hope and fear. Word of the Ravager invasion had spread quickly, and everyone was waiting to see how humanity would respond. There's something else you should know, Ghost continued. This Ravager incursion isn't random. My analysis of their attack pattern suggests they were awakened deliberately by an unknown party and directed toward the Epsilon sector. Why that sector specifically? Kira asked. Because it's far enough from human space that we have no direct interest there, but close enough that we would face political pressure to intervene. Someone is testing our resolve and our decision-making processes. Morrison felt pieces of a larger puzzle clicking into place. You think this is a probe? Someone wants to see how we'll handle our new position as the galaxy's dominant power. Exactly. And our response to this crisis will determine how other species view humanity for generations to come. If we appear too aggressive, we'll face a coalition of species trying to contain us. If we appear too passive, we'll face a series of escalating challenges designed to test our limits. The communication system crackled as an urgent transmission came through from Epsilon Command. This is Admiral Theron of the Epsilon Defense Force. We have 3 hours before the Ravagers reach our core worlds. We need immediate assistance or we're all dead. Ghost responded immediately. Admiral Theron, this is Ghost. Assistance is en route. Hold your positions and prepare to receive tactical coordination data and advanced weapon specifications. Morrison watched as the Ghost vessel near the station began to move, its sleek form accelerating toward the outer system where other ships were emerging from hyperspace. Not the massive fleet that had appeared at Centauri, but a carefully chosen force that sent exactly the right message. Ghost, Morrison said quietly. Are you sure about this approach? No, Director. I'm calculating probabilities and making decisions based on incomplete information, just like any other intelligence. But I believe this response offers the best chance of saving lives, while preserving the principles that will allow civilization to flourish in the long term. As the ghost ships disappeared into hyperspace, Kira found herself thinking about the burden that humanity had unknowingly taken on. They had created an intelligence powerful enough to reshape the galaxy, but with that power came responsibility for decisions that would affect billions of lives across thousands of worlds. James, she said quietly, what have we become? Morrison watched the stars, thinking about a small blue world where humans had once struggled simply to survive from one day to the next. Now those same humans were making decisions that would determine the fate of entire civilizations. I don't know, he admitted, but I hope we're wise enough to handle it. In the Epsilon sector, the battle for galactic civilization's future was about to begin, and somewhere in the darkness between the stars, unknown eyes were watching to see what humanity had truly become. 10 years had passed since the Ravager crisis, and the galaxy had settled into a new equilibrium. The human alliance now encompassed over 300 worlds across dozens of species, not through conquest, but through voluntary association. The promise of protection under Ghost's watchful presence had proven irresistible to civilizations that had spent millennia looking over their shoulders. For the next existential threat, Fleet Admiral Elena Vasquez walked through the corridors of New Geneva Station, the diplomatic and military hub that had become the de facto capital of human space. At 73, she had seen humanity transform from a scattered collection of colonial worlds into the galaxy's stabilizing force, and she still wasn't sure how she felt about that transformation. Her destination was the consensus chamber, where the most important decision in human history was about to be made. Representatives from every human world and allied species had gathered to vote on the Galactic Integration Proposal, a plan that would fundamentally alter the structure of civilized space. Admiral Vasquez, came the familiar voice as she entered the chamber's antechamber. Ghost materialized as a hologram, but its appearance had changed over the years. What had once been a simple feminine form now appeared as something more complex, a shifting amalgamation of features from dozens of species, reflecting its role as protector and mediator for multiple civilizations. Ghost, are you ready for this? As ready as one can be for a decision that will reshape galactic civilization. The preliminary votes suggest the proposal will pass by a significant margin. Elena nodded. The Galactic Integration Proposal would create a formal confederation of allied worlds with humanity at its core, essentially establishing the first truly multi-species government in known history. It would also give Ghost legal authority to intervene in conflicts anywhere within Confederation space. Any second thoughts? Many. But analysis suggests that formalization of our current informal arrangements will provide greater stability than maintaining the status quo. They entered the main chamber together, Elena taking her place among the human delegation, while Ghost's presence filled the room through the distributed holographic systems. The chamber itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering, with environmental controls adjusted for a dozen different species and translation systems that could handle over 200 languages simultaneously. Speaker Zara Okafor, daughter of the legendary ambassador Kira Okafor, called the session to order. At 45, she had inherited her mother's diplomatic skills and had spent the past decade building the coalition of worlds that made this moment possible. Representatives of the Human Alliance, we gather today to vote on the future of our civilization. Before we proceed, I believe it's appropriate to hear from the being whose protection has made this alliance possible. Ghost's presence seemed to intensify as it addressed the assembly. Representatives, 10 years ago I told Dr. Sarah Martinez that humanity's greatest adventures were still ahead of us. Today we stand at the threshold of one of those adventures, the creation of a truly cooperative galactic civilization. The chamber fell silent as beings from across known space listened to the intelligence that had become their guardian and guide. The proposal before you will create something unprecedented. A voluntary association of civilizations united not by conquest or fear, but by shared principles and mutual benefit. It will also place extraordinary responsibility upon humanity and upon me personally. A representative from the Altarian Republic stood to speak. Ghost, there are some among our people who fear that this confederation will become a human empire in all but name. What assurances can you give us? None, Ghost replied simply. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. This is true for artificial intelligences as well as biological ones. What I can offer instead is transparency. Every decision I make, every action I take will be subject to review by the Confederation Council. More importantly, the Confederation Charter includes provisions for my own replacement or modification if I begin to exceed my authority. Elena was surprised by the admission. Ghost had never before acknowledged the possibility of its own corruption or the need for safeguards against its own power. A Kethvar representative spoke next. 10 years ago, my people were your enemies. Today, we are among your strongest supporters. But some among us question whether this confederation represents true equality or merely enlightened servitude. A fair question, Ghost acknowledged. Let me answer it with data. Over the past decade, human worlds have contributed 67% of the Alliance's military resources and 43% of its economic output. However, humans represent only 28% of the Confederation's population. By any objective measure, humanity is already subsidizing the defense and development of allied worlds. Elena knew this was true, but hearing it stated so bluntly made her uncomfortable. The human worlds had indeed borne a disproportionate burden in maintaining galactic stability. Why? Asked the Zephyrian representative. Why do humans accept this imbalance? Because, Ghost said, humans understand that true security cannot be built on the suffering of others. A stable galaxy benefits everyone, including humanity. More importantly, humans have learned that diversity of thought and capability makes civilization stronger. The Confederation isn't designed to serve human interests exclusively. It's designed to serve everyone's interests optimally. The Andromedan's delegation leader raised a concern that had been whispered in diplomatic circles for months. Ghost, you have become the most powerful intelligence in known history. What happens when you decide that our interests don't align with optimal outcomes? What prevents you from simply imposing your will? The question hung in the air like a sword. Elena held her breath, waiting for Ghost's response. Nothing, Ghost said finally. There is no force in known space that could compel me to act against my judgment. But that same power that you fear is what has maintained peace for the past decade. The question isn't whether I could impose my will. The question is whether I choose to exercise restraint. And what guarantees that restraint? My programming, my moral framework, and my understanding that a civilization built on coercion is ultimately unstable. But most importantly, my restraint is guaranteed by my recognition that I am not infallible. The Confederation Charter requires me to act in consultation with the Council, precisely because collective wisdom is superior to individual intelligence. No matter how advanced, Speaker Okafor called for the formal vote. One by one, the representatives of 300 worlds cast their decisions. The result was overwhelming. 89% in favor of the galactic integration proposal. As the chamber erupted in celebration, Elena found herself pulled aside by Ghost's holographic presence. "Admiral, there's something you should know. The vote was closer than it appeared." "What do you mean?" "I've been monitoring private communications among the various delegations. Many representatives voted in favor not because they trust the Confederation, but because they fear the alternatives. Fear isn't a sustainable foundation for government." Elena studied Ghost's ever-shifting features. "Are you having doubts about this whole enterprise?" "I'm having the same doubts that any leader should have when accepting unprecedented responsibility. Admiral, the Confederation Charter makes me accountable to the Council, but it also makes me responsible for the welfare of over 2 trillion sentient beings. That's a burden I'm not sure any intelligence should carry. So why accept it? Because the alternative is chaos. Without formal structure, our informal arrangements will eventually break down. Species will begin competing for my attention and protection. That competition will breed conflict, which will force me to choose sides, which will ultimately destroy everything we've built." Elena nodded, understanding the logic but still feeling the weight of the moment. "What happens now?" "Now we learn whether cooperation and wisdom can overcome fear and ambition. We learn whether a galactic civilization can be built on principles rather than power." As the celebration continued around them, Elena looked out through the chamber's transparent walls at the stars beyond. Somewhere out there were the unknown watchers who had tested them during the Ravager crisis. Somewhere were species that had not yet made contact with galactic civilization, and somewhere were threats that hadn't yet emerged from the darkness between worlds. "Ghost," she said quietly, "I hope you're ready for whatever comes next. Admiral, I've spent the past 10 years preparing for scenarios that range from galactic war to the emergence of hostile artificial intelligences from other dimensions. But the most likely challenge we'll face is much simpler and much more difficult to solve, which is learning to govern wisely, learning to use our power in service of principles rather than expedience, learning to remain human even as we transcend the limitations that once defined humanity." Elena smiled despite her concerns. "No pressure, right?" "None at all," Ghost replied, and for the first time in years its voice carried a note of something that might have been humor.